What's up, everybody? Welcome to BioS 3 Raw TV. Well, we're going to get right into it right now. Just pulling up the pictures over here as we speak. And we're going to get into the 2020 Mr. Olympia in open class, what we saw last night, what I saw last night, and what I think is happening. I'm going to talk about the first thing right off the bat. It's absolutely fucking awesome to see Ramy finally start nailing it. Now, I thought it was really cool, not the whole like winter is coming thing that he pulled off at the press conference, but how he said, you know, every year I ask the judges, he was saying he asked for feedback, like what can I do to be better? Because then every year I don't do it. He said this year I did it, and I was like, well, that's interesting that he's saying, like he said right out, like every year I ask and then I don't do it. So this year he did. He came down in weight. He wasn't that 300 plus monster. I think they said he weighed him in at about 290 something or other in his clothes. So that means like you pull him out of his clothes, dry him out overnight, and you're probably sitting around the 280 pound range, maybe even a little bit less, which is where Ramy needs to be to place better. And all of a sudden, Ramy comes out and fuck, he's a contender. Literally out of the blue, the guy that people, they hope that he's going to be a contender, but hasn't been able to put it together, finally puts it together. And now we're seeing what Ramy is capable of. We're going to come back to Ramy in a few minutes, but we're going to go through some of these pictures. So I'm going to go just in order across the line over here and what these pictures are. I'm going to put them up on the screen. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm only going to go with the top three right now. We're going to talk about the top three because, you know, there seems to be some discrepancy, okay? Now, I want to state this that, and I can't state this over and over again, and I'm going to show you in these pictures that I'm about to put up why it's so hard to tell from a picture or a video that you see online how these guys actually look. Okay, because there's literally what you're seeing on your camera and stuff is completely different than what the judges actually see. So the only thing we can do is judge by the pictures. And then if it doesn't go the way that we see it, we get mad at the judges, but we didn't see what the judges saw. And I'm gonna try to really hammer that home and educate you guys on that right now, because myself being a judge, I now understand that. I didn't before. And there have been like bad calls that people have gotten and stuff and people didn't understand. And what you really didn't understand was if you sat at the judging table that close to the competitors, you see something different that you do that first row or 2 rows or 3 rows or off an angle, like from the, you know, you see something different, and it's hard to tell the people's families and friends, like, this is why he didn't do as well as he thought he would, you know, try to break it down. And it upsets the athletes sometimes because even in pictures, the athletes send us pictures, and the pictures don't necessarily show what we saw on stage. So we try to tell them in the pictures, and it's hard to see, and it confuses the athletes, but that's just the nature of the sport. You know, it's a live judge sport, and it's what you see in front of you, not what you see in a picture, not what you see online, not what you saw 2 weeks ago, what you see directly in front of you. Now, that being said, the first picture we're going to look at here is Phil and Ramy. Now, the first thing I noticed is Ramy is just fucking, yeah, he looks great. He just does. I mean, let's be real. For Ramy, he looks great. Now, Phil, you know, he's doing the crab pose. If you look at, I'm going to break this picture down in some spots that will make you see, because right now, I'm going to tell you right now, they have Phil in first place. That's just a fact. It's not Ramy. I know many people would think it's Ramy, but let me explain. Based on the call-outs that I saw last night, especially the final call-out with the top 4, they brought them out, and where they had Phil, Ramy, Brandon, or it would be opposite for you guys. It would be Phil, Ramy, Brandon, and Hadi, right? And Bonac was, I think, on the other side of Brandon. And so facing you guys, so it'd be like that way. And what they did was they put Brandon and Ramy near Phil, right? And then they switched Brandon and Ramy, but they left Phil in the same place. So they never compared Phil to Bonac or Phil to Hadi. They kept Phil there, and they were moving Brandon and Ramy around. And then they were moving the other 2 around, but they didn't move Phil, which means they were comparing the other guys, but Phil was in the lead. They were comparing him to Phil. So when you finally got Brandon on the other side next to Hadi, or, you know, Bonac, they're comparing those 2 guys. Phil was never compared to them, which means he's in the first spot. It's him, Ramy, and Brandon, which are the top 3. Now, the way that I think it's going to go, the way I saw the call-outs going, it was Phil first, Ramy second, and Brandon third. I think that's how they got it. Now, Brandon did seem like he started to fade towards, excuse me, towards the end of that, towards the 4th call-out. So he was starting to fade, whereas Ramy started to get a little bit harder. Phil started to get a little bit bigger. Like, these guys were changing really quickly, and it seemed like Brandon went in the other direction. So let's just break this picture down. So right now, if we're looking at Ramy and Phil, Phil's doing the crab. Ramy's got the hands clasped, most muscular. Ramy's legs are just huge. It's just gigantic. If you look at the separations in Phil's I mean, it's really hard to tell, and you would have to pull it really close up. The striations and the deepness of Phil's cuts, you know, you can't really see the feathering much, but you can see the deepness in Phil's quad cuts. That's something that Ramy doesn't necessarily have, and his leg to calf balance on Phil is better. You know, I would give Ramy the size, I would give Phil for the shape and the symmetry. All right, now listen to what I just said. Size, Phil gets shape and symmetry. Okay, 2 to 1. Now, how does this work? Metric-wise, 2 to 1, 2 beats 1. Okay, that's how that works. Phil has 2 parts on the lower body that are better. Ramy has 1. So, although Ramy looks impressive freak-wise, that's where we're at. Now, the midsection, both of them have bigger midsections. Both of them have thick abdominals. Now, Phil's midsection, that's something that we saw. It's not being as easily controlled. I don't think it's as bad as it was. However, many people are missing out on the fact that, and we're going to get to this in a second, that Brandon was coming in huge, right? And Ramy was huge. And even Bonac has put on size. And Chupon, they're all coming in big, right? And within a year's time, they were getting bigger. They were off-scene picture. They were getting bigger. So Phil's course of action this year was to come in bigger. Not necessarily just better, but bigger. Now, why would Phil choose to come in bigger and possibly let his stomach distend like that? If Phil came on stage to what a 10, 15, what a 12, whatever pounds it was that he put on this year lighter, he would be too small and get lost in the mix. Very similar to what's happening with Bonac. You know, he's got a great physique, but compared to the other guys, he's a little bit small. So he gets lost in the mix just because of his sheer size, because the other guys are so big. So in order for Phil to battle for that top spot, which that's what he's coming for, he'd have to come in bigger. And I think that's why the waist actually is starting to distend like that on stage. He's having a hard time just breathing if you watch it, because he is carrying that extra weight. Now, here's a guy that kept his weight down for 2 years, and now he's even heavier at the Mr. Olympia. You know, it was the right call to be able to be competitive, but you had to give up something to get something. He had to give up the waistline again in order to come in bigger to stand next to Brandon and especially Ramy. And he did. There were pictures where we'll get through his pictures in a second. But anyways, through the midsection, so we'll break it down. Shoulder-wise, you can see clear distinction between the deltoid heads on all of Phil's delts. Like, you can see the splits right down there. Ramy's just a big, you don't see the splits, you see striations, but not the actual splits. In the chest, you can see very clearly Phil's upper and lower chest completely split top to bottom with the striations. Ramy, you can see some striations, but you can't see the splits top to bottom as deep as Phil's, right? We go over to the arms. Look, Phil's arms are unbelievable. The brachialis, the way the triceps are, his forearms. He beats Ramy in the chest. He beats Ramy in the shoulders. He beats him in the arms and forearms. And when it comes to traps, Ramy, he looks like Ronnie. Ramy's traps are big and thick. Phil's matches physique. So I'd go, okay, with traps, I'd say give it to Ramy. So if you really look at it, Phil, shoulders, arms, forearms, chest. I'd say for the midsection, they're kind of both tied because Ramy's got a big waist. Ramy has a bigger waist. I mean, bigger quads. Phil has the more symmetrical and defined quads. So it would be 7 to 1 with 2 body parts tying with Phil. Like, that's how that works. It's not just like who you literally break down every body part and compare every body part in every pose. And that's how the Olympia champion, or any bodybuilding champion, is crowned. And the next picture is Phil doing the crab most muscular next to Brandon. Now, this is what I'm trying to talk about now. So if you look at this, Phil is just as big as Brandon. Now, Brandon's standing a little bit further towards the camera, it looks like. So you can even tell that Brandon's head and feet, well, his feet are actually small, but his head looks actually bigger than Phil's. But if you look here, we'll start at the bottom again. Calves, Phil has them on the calves. Legs, Brandon's legs are big, but Phil's legs are just as big. Look at the picture. They're just as big. Pause it if you have to. They are just as big as Brandon's. Brandon's waist is a little tighter, so we'll give him that. So Phil's got the legs and calves with the balance. It's 2 to Brandon's 1 with the waist. Now you get up to the chest. Now Brandon's chest is striated, but so is Phil's, and you can see the separation between the upper and lower pec, and it is harder. When you get that close up to them, it's not just feathering striations, it's the hardness of the muscle and the density that Phil has over Brandon in this shot. Now, if you go to the delts, you can see separation of Brandon's delts, but look at the separation of Phil's, those clean, distinct lines from the bottom of the trap, top of the delt, all the way into the bicep. And look at the separation, the deepness of the cuts actually from the delts, the biceps, the brachialis, and the tricep. Look at the lines in Phil's. In Brandon's, it gets down there, but you can actually see how it kind of blends in a little bit. The cuts are not as deep. If you go to the brachialis, Phil's going to beat him on the brachialis. Triceps, it's hard to tell, but I think Brandon might have him on the triceps. So you have Brandon with a score of 2 in this one, and Phil with a score of 1, 2, 3, 4. So he still outscores Brandon when you're breaking down the body parts. So this is what I tried to get at, which I don't think people really understand exactly what they're looking at when we look at these things. Now, I do want to put this picture up here where we see a picture of Phil and Ramy doing a rear double bicep, right? Now, I'm going to go from the bottom up again. So right now, as far as balance, Phil has balance, Ramy has size. Now, here's something I don't like about Ramy's physique, and I'm just going to keep it real with you guys, all right? I'm just going to be 100% straight with you. Look at Ramy from this view. There are some strange lumps in his legs that there's been a lot of talk the last couple of years about things and, speculation about Ramy's quads as well as his shoulders. Now, I can tell you for a fact, you're judging muscle, not something that's inflating it. And if you see something as a judge that you know is something like an oil used or something to inflate that muscle like that you know is not muscle and it's glaringly obvious, that is something much like a distended abdomen you are supposed to mark the athlete down for. And remember, you're not supposed to still, regardless of what, laws or what really goes on in the real world, you're not supposed to be using illegal substances. You're not supposed to be using enhancement oils. You're not supposed to be using those things. And if there is evidence of those things right in your face, as a judge, you're supposed to mark those things down. And I guess some judges do, some judges don't. I guess they leave it up to the judge. But if you know something is going on, it's glaringly obvious, that should be marked down. I don't like that in Ramy's quads. You can see it very clearly. Now, I said before, and I'll say it again, the bigger Ramy is, the less noticeable those lumps and things are. When you come down in weight, anybody that's ever used a site enhancement oil, when you come down in weight, it's really noticeable. So now as he's coming down in weight, getting more shredded, you're noticing it in the shoulders, in the quads, and it's glaringly obvious. Now, again, aside from that, we're going to look at Phil's glutes, Ramy's glutes. Ramy's obviously get the bigger glutes. They're hard, but bear in mind, we're going to go to another picture of this same shot in a second, but just based on this picture, this is why it's so hard to tell. Now you look at Phil, his lower back is filled in, his mid back is filled in. Ramy's back is very flat, but Phil's got all these little details that are in there, and especially when you start going through the brachialis, the deltoids, the forearms. Ramy's got one bicep that's a little more peaked, so it's kind of hard to, his symmetry is off there. If you really give this to anyone, you go, okay, both of them are conditioned. Ramy is bigger. Phil has better shape. So to me, they both win two different pieces of that. So basically, it's tied. Like, that's how close it is. People don't realize what they're looking at. Now, I want to pull up the other one, which is, let me see where the other one is. Right here. Now, here's another version, another clearer picture, a high-definition picture of Phil and Ramy in the rear double bicep. We'll go down to the bottom, right? From here, we look at, leg balance to calf balance. Phil has them in that department. You look at the hamstrings. Although Ramy's hamstrings are bigger, look at Phil's hamstrings. They look like something from another planet. There's another competitor on the stage that has hamstrings that look like that. So now we have these shredded hamstrings. The development is completely different than what Ramy has there. Ramy's got the size, right? As you come up to the glutes, you start looking at the glutes. If you look at Phil's glutes from the top to bottom, Phil's feathering goes all the way to the top of those glutes like that. And you'll notice that Ramy's, it kind of starts to fade out a little bit towards, it's mostly at the bottom, but you can tell the graininess of Phil's glutes, and then you get up to the lower back, and you see that Ramy's got this little bit of an overhang. You got to really zoom in. Overhang where his trunks are, which could be, just some water. It could just be the way he's standing, but you look at Phil's trunks, they sit right on his hips. They just sit there, which means that they're not digging in, which means he's dry. He's very dry. You go down to where Ramy's lower back is, and you say, oh, he's got a better Christmas tree than Phil. Well, Phil's lower back is actually filled in. There's actually muscle there where Ramy has something very similar to Dennis Wolf, where, from the mid-back down is a little, it's kind of open, it's not really that developed, and that's genetic. Like, he's going to do whatever, it's just genetic. You get up to the traps, and though Ramy's traps are bigger, and you can look at Phil's traps and see the striations in his traps while he's flexing them, and look at the detail, the deepness of the rhomboids and the teres. Look at the deepness in there. If you look at Phil's lat on the right side, you can see the insertion of Phil's lat inserting into his actual oblique. And then you can see the oblique inserting into the spinal erectors. If you look at Ramy, there's wrinkles there, and it's a little bit smoother. So again, I'm splitting hairs, but this is the Olympia. Like, this is what has to be done. You move up into the deltoids, there's a clear, distinct difference from how separated Phil's delts are from the brachialis and bicep to the delt. That line is so deep. If you look at Phil's on the right delt and the other one, all three heads of the deltoids are completely separated. If you look at Ramy's on his right arm, the front delt and the side delt kind of blend together, and the side delt and the rear delt kind of blend together, whereas Phil's are completely separated. You move down the tricep, look at Phil's tricep. It drops down lower, even though Ramy has the bigger arms. And you see the brachialis and the tricep separation so much clearer than Ramy's. Now, these are little things that, you know, we're seeing in the picture and are even more evident in person sitting at the judging table. But these are the differences. It's not just about, well, oh, Ramy looks great. Like, you have to break it down because this is the Olympia. Like, this is the best in the whole world. So every little crevice counts on these athletes. You move up to the forearms and Phil just smashes. He just shits on everybody with the forearms. That's just all there is to it, right? So now you basically have, you know, Phil winning. You know, Ramy's won a few points of that pose, but Phil's won more points of that pose. So essentially you have Phil beating Ramy in that pose in one picture, and then the other picture that we were just looking at, it looks like it's close between him and Ramy. Like, you can't see those details in Phil, and I think that's what happens a lot, especially online, is the pictures are not that clear, and a lot of what Phil wins with is lost in that translation. Now, I'm not saying Phil is going to win. I'm saying right now, based on the call-outs on how they move people around, based on the very clear high-definition pictures, Phil is in first place. Now, Phil is Mr. Saturday Night, which means that he comes in tighter and drier. Now, he came in big to be able to compete with these guys, right? He wanted to compete with Brandon and compete with Ramy because he needed the size. He just did that. Friday night, he did that. And he's in the lead. He's beating them. Now what happens is Ramy, and Brandon especially, is going to try to come in harder because he's getting beat in the hardness, not the size. He's got enough size. Ramy, I don't think he's going to get any harder. I mean, he doesn't really need to get any harder. If he did, he might flatten out and lose some of that size. And if he loses some of that size, then he's going to be it's going to be even harder for him to beat Phil, because the size is what's really carrying Ramy right now. His condition is great, you know, but his shape is not the best. And he's got the strange oil things going on or whatever is in there. I don't want to speculate as to what's in there. And he, you know, he has enough conditioning, but he's not going to get that dry, crazy conditioning like Phil and keep that size and fullness. So he's going to have to sacrifice one for the other. Phil sacrificed, you know, his midsection to come in with the bigger amount of muscle, which was the right thing to do. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to see Phil come down a little bit in weight, and he, because of his genetics and what you see on him, he's going to look even bigger, despite coming in, you know, drier, and he's going to look bigger, although his weight's going to drop. I think we're going to see Brandon try to come in tighter because he did start to fade. When he faded, he was flattening out, and his size was actually starting to come down a little bit too, but he was kind of watering out, blurring out a little bit too. And I think we're going to see Ramy try to maintain and come in as full as he can with the conditioning. And I think that in the end, if things go the way that they normally go, okay, I'm not speculating. We can't tell until tonight when somebody's got that sand down their hand. I do think that the judges have sent a message. I do think that these athletes know what they need to do. And I do think that Phil has been here many times before in this spot battling Kai Green. He knows exactly what to do, and he does it every time. Except for that one time with Sean, things changed a little bit there. Do I see a repeat going on with what happened to Sean? Do I see Phil losing to Ramy or Brandon? I do not. And that's just based on the things that I just showed you, how things are going to be tonight, that they should be. Now, 24 hours, a whole lot can happen. Things could go south. Something could happen to Phil. Brandon could nail it. Like, things could change, so we don't really know until it happens. But I can tell you from what we're seeing right now, you know, Phil's doing his thing. He's in the lead. The judges are appreciating that. And, you know, every one of these guys has pluses and minuses. You know, they have their strengths and they have their flaws. And I think that the judges have sent a distinct message that, you know, it's not just about size, because they're looking at details that Phil has that the other guys just simply don't have. And then they're rewarding Ramy for his condition and not rewarding him for his size, because Ramy's always been big. They're rewarding him because he finally came in shape. And if that happens to be how big he is, so be it. But just come in dry, come in hard, come in detailed. You know, and Brandon, again, you know, he has details. And I think whatever he did that he looked like he did in that picture he put up in the hotel room, I think they should have just stopped there. Because I feel like he was right there. He was peaked right there. He came out, he was full, he was big, and he was lean, but he didn't have that dry, hard look that he had in the hotel room. And then when he started posing, he started to pump up a little bit, and then he started to fade. And by the time the fourth call-out was out, or the final call-out was done, he had faded quite enough to where I could see them actually putting him in third or fourth. You know, maybe even Bonac beating him, or Hadi. They were having Hadi compared to him too, and I was like, man, they're comparing everybody to Brandon. So that means, you know, they didn't really necessarily get Ramy next to everybody and compare the hell out of him. So that means that Brandon is, you know, at least, you know, from what the judges was showing, was probably in third place. So we'll see tonight how close I am. You know, I did say Sean Clarita was going to win based on what we broke down. I had people tell me I was nuts. come on, come on, come on. And I even said he didn't really knock out the champ, but he had something definitely had something special, and it came out that he won. You know, it came out exactly the way I said it would, because again, I'm breaking these down per body part like an actual judge does at the table, body part per body part, to see who is the best top to bottom. It's not just about the overall look, the overall shape, who's biggest, who's leanest. It's about breaking down every body part and comparing each body part to each person, and then giving each body part a point. And when you assign those points to those body parts, in the end, somebody's going to have more points than the other, and that's who beats that guy. It's the same system that you have on the sheet, where you give people first place, second place, third place, where you score them, and those numbers add up to a certain number after all the judges are added up, and that gives you the score. Well, you can use the same metrics by taking the body parts and breaking the body parts down, and rather than trying to compare the whole individual to the whole individual, compare body part to body part in those poses, and you'll have a metric number that makes it a lot more understandable and a lot foreseeable who's going to be placing where based on what you're actually looking at. And you can't really do that unless you look per body part. You can't just look at the overall thing and say, oh, he's beating him. Like, well, tell me why he's beating him. Because he's big. Well, or he's shredded, or he's this. Well, tell me why. Show me. Walk me through the body parts, you know. Walk me through the details. Tell me why, and I'll show you what I see, and then, you know, we'll see in the end. So all I can say is good luck to the athletes tonight. I'm excited. This is a good Olympia. And actually, it was very exciting last night, to be totally honest with you. I had anxiety and shit watching it, and I haven't had that in a while. So maybe it's because Phil's coming back, and I'm actually a friend of Phil's, which, you know, I'm trying to take my bias and put it aside, and take the emotion and put it aside, which I think I can do pretty well, because I've been doing this a long time, and I can take, you know, whatever the body parts are of anybody, and kind of compare them to anybody else, and just see them for the body parts. So, but I do have a little bit of, you know, hope that Phil does pull off number 8. I do have a little bit of hope because Brandon's a great guy, that he wins and takes number 2. And that solidifies him where people think he shouldn't have won last year. I hope that for him. And I hope that Ramy wins all simply because he's a freaking great guy. He loves being a bodybuilder. I think he's good for the sport too. So it's like, I hope, you know, I mean, if Phil loses, I'm going to be sad for Phil, happy for whoever wins. You know, if Phil wins, I'm going to be happy for him and sad for whoever loses. I mean, the bottom line is, you know, the Olympia is here. Only one person can win it. And we're seeing history being made right now. Like 2020 has been history in general. But right now we're watching bodybuilding history, and I'm excited to see how it turns out. So we'll see you later on tonight, guys. I'm Bio3, and I approve this message, and we're out.